So we have a nice eclectic collection of kind of 1930s to 40s German rifles of different configurations and setups.
Very Russian-like weather out here. It's wet and snowy.
Yeah.
And muddy.
Yeah, but you know, that's part of the adventure. It kind of sets the mood and sets the tone for the day.
So here's the base of what we're talking about today, of some of the firearms we have. We have the standard infantry KAR98k, chambered in 8mm Mauser. And this particular example is interesting because this one has a receiver that's marked Gewehr 98. And it also has markings on the receiver too that are Weimar. So this rifle, to the best of my knowledge, was a rifle that was built originally to be used in World War I, and they repurposed it into a K98 used in World War II. And this one has a little bit of repairs. This one's kind of my field version. Some repair in the back of the stock here. And it's got a little bit of defacing on the receiver. It's bright on the receiver for some reason. All the finish is off. And but it's a little bit of a beater. This one is a good shooter though. May have a little bit of issues with the trigger, but not too bad. It's a little light sometimes. But it's still a better shooter than the other one that I have that I don't have on the table today. I have another video on that. You can look at that up close. That's my DOU.
Alright.
And this one, I don't quite know what it is because it's been horribly defaced, which makes it a good reenacting gun.
Yeah.
Because you can just do whatever you want with it. And those of you who don't know, that all these rifles shoot this is the 8mm Mauser. You got some example up there of probably much nicer ammo than this.
A little bit.
But this looks a lot like the German ammo did though, right? They used the steel.
Some of the nickel-plated bullets.
Yeah.
And then either brass or steel cartridge casings. I have steel cartridges up front there. I do know for a fact that they did also use brass cases because, well, I fired some just a few days ago, 1942 German surplus. So.
And that was actually steel casing? Or was
no, it was brass. Brass casing, copper jacket, and it was pretty hot. A lot hotter than the Yugo stuff I've been shooting lately.
Mm-hmm. And then, so you see a little bit of variation of ammo quality throughout the war too, as well as with everything else.
Yeah, especially towards the end, you know, if your factories have all burned to the ground, you're going to be kind of scrounging a little bit for just what powder and ammunition and whatever you can get. So, yeah, you're just going to run what you have. So, there seems to be some variation in the general purpose ammunition. For the sniper rifles like these, they were actually issued their own sniper spec ammunition. That was loaded more consistent, that they actually were much more meticulous in the loading process of the ammunition, just to get as much consistency as possible. Accuracy comes from consistency, so they really put an emphasis on that for the strict sniper ammunition.
So speaking of the sniper ammunition, you have a sniper variant here that you built.
Correct.
This one right here.
Yes, this rifle right here, it was a K98 that had been sporterized to a modern setup with a fiberglass stock, and bolt handle was bent down and forged down and ground away. Had a modern scope mount set up on it as well. And I ended up finding a reproduction stock, ended up acquiring all the rest of the parts that were this rifle was made in 1944. So I found 1944 style parts for it. Was able to put all of those together. Picked up the scope mount itself from AccuMount and found a 1980s reproduction scope that I put on, and I just completely rebuilt this gun kind of from the ground up to be a sniper variant Mauser.
You did a phenomenal job on it. It's clean.
It was
so
very.
It's a good-looking gun.
It was a learning experience, learning how to properly mount the scope, in that a lot of other gunsmiths that I spoke to, a lot of old retired gunsmiths had no idea about soldering scope bases to receivers and soldering scopes into rings. So I kind of had to figure that out largely. I found an old book from a late gunsmith, and he talked about it a little bit on high caliber safari rifles, so I was able to figure out how to properly solder on the mount and the scope, and then re-blued everything, refinished it all, and just brought it up to looking like it was, just left the factory, straight for the front.
Yeah, it looks
So
absolutely gorgeous.
yeah,
And you said that this one it's a 3-letter code, BYF. So that is.
so it was made in Berlin. It was made in Berlin in 1944, which I can't show you the markings because, well, the scope base is soldered to them. So unfortunately, I can't show you those. But yeah, it was actually made in Berlin in 1944, and the rifle is just absolutely beautiful, and it shoots phenomenally well, especially for what it is and the ammo I've been running. It shoots very well.
And your scope setup and your mounts. The scope is a reproduction of the model ZF39.
Correct. Yeah, fixed 4-power. It has the 3-post, the German 3-post reticle. Drop compensation in the turret, so your elevation adjustments come from just the turret alone. Any windage, you have 2 screws in your base that you basically tighten and loosen to move the rear of your scope to adjust your point of impact for the windage. So that's less than ideal in a scope. However, once you get it kind of set up and figure out how to run it, it's actually not too difficult to just hold over for windage and just kind of assume. It's basically the old phrase of Kentucky windage. Well, this is Jertucky windage, because you just kind of,
Bavarian windage.
yeah, you just kind of have to wing it a little bit from time to time. But yeah, all in all, I'm very pleased with the scope, very pleased with the rifle, and it was a fun project to do, and I've thoroughly enjoyed my time and learning more and more about these rifles. The more I've had to work on them, the more I've learned. I did end up having to make a bolt handle from scratch for this rifle too, to get rid of the old sporterized one. I don't know if I send some pictures in, if you can put them up of what it looked like before.
Those pictures up, yeah.
But yeah, you'll be able to see how the bolt handle had to be made.
See it.
Yeah, had to be made from scratch, put on, and then forged into place, and then blended and basically made to look like it was intentionally done.
So moving on here too, kind of backwards in order of when these things came to be. So this is an example that I have here of another sniper, but this one is, as I trip on the bucket here, this one is just fascinating. This is not an original rifle, but it is as close as you can get,
Yeah.
that I can find, at least here, of an original World War II sniper rifle. And I was very, very fortunate to find it. So the story on this is, this rifle itself is also a Gewehr 98 receiver. So this is a World War I Mauser that was cut down into the K98 barrel. Looks like it was refinished at some point. A little bit of stuff has been done to it. This rifle probably served through World War II as a standard K98. And then some point after the war, this mount, which is a reproduction mount, was put on it with this scope, which the scope is somewhat of a mystery, but my best guess is that this is a immediately post-World War II scope out of Jena, Germany, which is where Zeiss had their factory. And I only can say that because nowhere on the scope does it say Zeiss, and we can show you when we zoom in. And this actually started your interest in building yours.
It did, yeah. It looked like a lot of fun. It looked like a fun gun to shoot, fun gun to run, and it got me going on turning my rifle from the sporterized atrocity that it was and building it up and doing it the right way.
Yeah, this thing kind of sparked interest in both of us to try to.
Yeah.
So now you're helping me figure out the one thing that was wrong with this. This mount was soldered on, just like you saw on his rifle, and this one, either it was never done or it broke off.
I don't think it was ever done. It has no remnants of solder.
So this front post here, this front mount, is a little jiggly.
But we can get that sorted out.
And I have fired this, and I'm not going to shoot it today because it's just not even going to compete with Kevin's rifle today. It is a really nice example. It's really gorgeous. A lot of the parts are near period, or the rifle itself is 100% period to World War II, besides the modification with the scope. Other than that, yeah, it's not quite dialed in yet, so we're not going to do much shooting with it today. I'm going to talk a little bit too about like what we've researched on German snipers in World War II, on how they operated, how they use these rifles, the limitations of the rifles. Like, I think it's interesting that a lot of fan fiction and a lot of like media about World War II snipers is like, oh my god, like they're so good, like it's all state of the art, like Saving Private Ryan and stuff, and then you actually handle these and you're like, oh my god, this
is archaic.
Extremely primitive. Like, just talking about like your modification on the windage.
Yeah.
It's like, you pretty much like, everyone like, you know, drools over like Germany and their snipers.
Yeah.
When like they were severely limited with what they could do.
Yes, and yeah, the American sniper program of World War II, they definitely had much better scope setups, and their scopes are actually adjustable for minute of angle for windage and elevation.
It's almost like the Americans were really fond of shooting. The Germans, it was like, well, we can like put a bunch of gadgets on it and make it cool looking, but
it was it's really hunting scopes. The Germans basically used hunting scopes. The Americans used long-range target scopes. So there's a slight difference in overall function in those regards.
Which brings up too, like, one of the mysteries about this actual scope is there's speculation too that not speculation, there's documentation of the Germans when they required sniper rifles. These were extremely difficult to get into the hands of actual sharpshoots in it.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of times guys would just get they go through sniper school and then get handed a normal K98.
Yeah.
Or they'd be like, here you go, here's the ZF41 thing.
Yeah, it's basically a scout scope mount that mounts over the rear sight.
Which
it was a 1.5 times power. That was just a little bit more popular than the sniper scopes, but not the best. Still better than the Mauser iron sights, which in my opinion leave a lot to be desired. But it was still an improvement over the irons, but it wasn't quite ideal still.
And a lot of research I did, they were like absolutely hated by actual snipers, actual sharpshooting, but they started when the snipers finally said, we don't want these, just get us proper. And they gave them to the normal infantry, and they loved them, of course, because they were like, this is way better than the irons.
Yeah.
But back to these, is like, the demand for these were so high, like Zeiss and other companies, like wherever they were at
Henschel was one.
They were just basically like guys were raiding civilian markets to be like, give us a scope because we can't make enough of these ZF39s.
Yeah, it was civilian hunting scopes were commonly mounted as well. Just whatever the German military could get their hands on is what they decided they wanted to use, and all sorts of stuff were pressed into service. There's even an 8-power scope that was used very seldomly, but I just had a guy reach out to me wanting to build a rifle for him with a Zeiss 8-power period scope and build up an old Mauser for him. So that'll be another fun project in taking apart that scope and putting it back together again to solder it on.
Yeah, elaborate like the process of like these both of these mounts, these both reproduction mounts, they're not split rings. World War II had almost entirely one-piece rings. It is a one-piece ring. So in order to mount the scope and get it to stay in place, you're supposed to solder everything in place. Well, if you touch a blowtorch to a scope to solder it and you don't get a little bit of adrenaline, there might be something wrong. So I had to basically take the scope apart, take all the lenses out in order to heat it up to solder it on. And it was, it's just like any other soldering job. It was just a little more high stakes. The fun part was putting everything back together once everything was soldered on. But yeah, it was basically take out all the lenses, take off the rear bell housing here, and slide the rings on. Let's see, come on. I got it on there too good, and I'm just going to leave it. And you want to protect that glass because both of these examples, I don't know who contracted out that made that reproduction, but both of these examples, possibly a real Zeiss from the 50s, and
Yeah.
a reproduction. Both of them excellent glass.
Yeah.
They might not be super powerful, but for even an old scope like this,
Yeah, it's a fixed 4.
very good picture.
Mine's a fixed 4 power, and it is actually very clear glass. The 3-post reticle it's unique, but I enjoy it because it is something a little bit different, and it is still quite usable. Just last week, I got this rifle out and was ringing steel about a torso-sized target at 650 yards. So it can be quite accurate when it's done right and with the right ammunition. A lot of that comes from proper soldering job to hold everything in place. The other part comes from good ammunition and a lot of time shooting to learn how to do it properly. I think that's one of the big kickers, is the time you have to put into it.
Yeah, and also the Germans operated solo. Their
Yes.
sharpshooters very often operated by themselves. Probably was one of their downfalls.
Definitely. From what we know with snipers today, is that running solo definitely tends to put a damper on the combat effectiveness. The Germans went out just kind of as, basically like hunters going into the woods. They just ended up going solo and searched out their own targets, picked their own shots, and took a few shots from one particular location, then moved on to the next one. That was unlike the Americans, which ended up using multiple guys to pick out targets. And by today's standards, snipers travel in pairs. You have a spotter and a shooter. The spotter finds targets. The shooter, well, they put rounds on target. So, yeah, it's interesting looking at the tactics involved in the snipers, their applications, and how they were deployed in combat. A lot of snipers were used on the Eastern Front, and yeah, the Eastern Front was that was a brutal aspect of that conflict, to put it lightly. But that's where it seems a lot of snipers were used, and they were used fairly effectively from the sound of it. It seems that Hollywood has mythologized a lot of the German snipers, and that from accounts that I've read, very seldom were snipers actually found and people claimed, oh, there was a sniper shooting at us. Often it'd be a straggling German soldier with a bolt action who just waited for a great shot, took it, and it just caused a huge morale dump in the Allied forces, going, we're under sniper fire, when reality was it was probably a guy just armed with a standard K98 who just took pot shots at a group of soldiers standing around just drinking coffee or having a cigarette.
Especially when, as rare as these guns started to get, especially towards the end of the war.
Yeah.
Like, it's a sniper, and it's like, well, he probably doesn't have a rifle if he is, even.
Yeah.
Or he could just be a normal guy.
They're upplayed very similar to the number of tigers that they claim, that tankers claim to have encountered. It's about like infantrymen and snipers, where they claim they were everywhere. The reality was numbers say otherwise.
It is interesting to look at on the Eastern Front as well as the difference in how the Soviet Union and the Germans approached. It seems like the German sniper program is almost like reactionary to what the Soviets were doing, but they were kind of refused to follow suit. Like, no, we won't have teams. No, we're going to value more, like individual dudes, and we're going to value more.
Yeah.
Like better optics and supposedly better gun platforms, and that we can't get to our own troops anyway. Like,
yeah.
And it seems like the Soviets did a lot with a little, because they maximized their ability to, like, not just have a sharpshooter, but also have scouts and also have a harassing unit.
Yes.
That was bigger than just a group of like one or two guys.
Yes.
Which I don't know much about the Soviets, but it's just such a black and white contrast of how they went about it.
Yeah, it's a pretty drastic contrast. Yeah, the Soviet tactic of when your enemy runs out of ammunition, you win by default because you threw so many bodies in that they can't shoot back. It's not a great strategy, but I can't say that it's not effective, because history has shown that it was effective for them. Not the greatest, but it was effective.
And they even did it with the way they went about the snipers. They were like,
yeah,
I have one guy, we can have 5.
Yes,
and it just how do you compete with that when you're a German sharpshooter?
That's
Yeah.
that hasn't eaten in 2 days,
Yeah.
and yeah, it's a little tricky.
Yeah, and they're all communicating and they're like calling each other shots and relocating. It's like if you're just a lone hunter and you only thing you see is what you see around you. Granted, these guys were good.
Yeah.
They were incorporating a lot of new stuff because they had a head start in World War One as well. They were good
Yes.
in World
Yeah.
War
The Germans, I think, spearheaded sniper programs.
One. And we watched some training on this that's available on YouTube. You should, if you can
Yes,
find
there
it,
is
look
some-
it up on how advanced they were with just the concealment and the bushcraft and the patience. Like the Germans were really disciplined with that.
Yes.
And the Soviets, they were doing that too,
I
but
don't-
it was like almost neck and neck, you know. Like
I don't know to what extent the Soviets put into it.
and
I haven't studied the Soviet tactics all that much. I've mostly studied the German and the Americans.
they're the most flashy ones for sure, is the Germans.
Yeah.
And it makes you
Very prestigious.
you're watching a lot of this training, and you're like there's to a point where it goes to the borderline hilarious of like, I'm gonna use like stuff around me and camouflage. Yeah, that's a good idea. They're like, I'm gonna build a blind and push it in front of me, or at the very end, the icing on the cake was the man that was entirely wearing birch bark, and you're like, is this even practical at this point anymore? No one is doing this in the field, but hey, it looks good for the camera. Like very
Looks
German
good at
of them.
In that one instance where it was needed to wrap yourself in birch bark, it served that sniper very well, and they decided to teach everyone about it. So, I guess for that one time, for that one
did
guy
this.
in that one exact scenario, it worked amazingly well. For everyone else, that's a little bit impractical.
And yeah, it'd be worth doing another video researching and comparing the Soviets.
Yeah, that would be.
Another good time too would be compare the Canadians and the British too, which
Yes.
in my opinion I think they were the best.
I would venture to say that they definitely held their own and were some of the best for sure. And the way they were employed is much more similar to modern scout sniper practices. Yeah, the way the Black Watch operate and everything. Forward observers, yeah, that's a lot more similar to modern tactics. Modern philosophy to
as
World
far
War
as-
II, the British and the Canadians are definitely the closest to that.
like because that's why I love reenacting too, especially being the bad guys. It's like I love dispelling the myths of like, oh, it's the
Yeah,
best
it's not the
stuff.
greatest. It's not the
And it's like,
greatest.
there's photos of guys and like, yeah, you can't tell the difference between this and like a VZ24 really.
Yeah.
But us, we're like, that's a different gun. That's not a K98. Why are they
Yeah.
using different guns? Well, one is probably an SS guy, and that's also fun dispelling the SS myths, being like, they weren't the best and the brightest. They were
Garbage monsters, a lot of them.
they were just like they were fighting with the army. The army wouldn't let them have crap, and then the army took all the good stuff, and the SS would take all the weird stuff. And the SS, really, when it comes to small arms,
you can always just do
the
this.
SS just got shafted, and
Start
it's
running, but-
hilarious. When everyone's like, "They're so good," and I was like, "They used shit from World War One, like they
Yeah.
had to."
They kind of got what they
Yeah.
deserved.
Yeah, and it's like, it's just one of those golden. You look back on history and be like, "Oh, that's hilarious that this country, their military units couldn't even get along."
All of the infighting, long term.
The SS even had their own sniper mount and variation. They used
Yeah, they
the
did.
side mount.
Yeah, they had a side claw mount that was.
kind of jank, kind of goofy.
Yeah, it was definitely funky for sure. I looked into putting one of those together when I was putting this rifle together, but I liked this mount setup better. It just seemed much more rigid and solid.
This is the
And
pretty mount for sure.
yeah, for using it's the high tower mount. For using the high tower mount, I figured that would be better because I am entering this rifle into vintage sniper matches, so I wanted to do it right and build it up in the correct way. Another fun thing with why the German scope mounts are so stinking tall, and Kenley, have you noticed this or taken advantage of the ability to
The
continue to
co-witness?
use your iron sights with it?
The co-witness, isn't that a novel thing to see in the 1930s?
Yeah, where you can
Co-witnessing.
still look through the hole in your scope mounts to use your iron sights, because why use your scope when you have perfectly trash iron sights?
Well, so
Yeah.
Laura, we better do some shooting.
I would agree with you on that.
All right. We'll get going.
you have to load the snipers with loose rounds. You cannot use stripper clips with the scope on the rifle.
Weite Scharfschützen.
Crap ammo.
Didn't see it. Oh, didn't see it. Damn check ammo. Can't see where it's going quite.
Well, when my scope is still set for shooting 650 yards, I had 2 rounds impacting over the top of each other here, and the other 3 just kind of there with some 1970s Yugo surplus ammunition. So, you know, not the most accurate, and for not adjusting my scope down from my project last weekend. Yeah, not the greatest shooting, but not the worst. But you know, everything's all within a fist-sized group.
Just a little,
from
just a little high.
110 yards, so no rest. Yeah, not the greatest, not the worst, but 2 rounds impacting over the top of each other there, and the other 3.
That's
So,
about how they were shooting too within that, and they were shooting well within that distance too. That would be actually a pretty long shot
yeah,
for actual World War II Scharfschützen. So
Yeah.
that's not bad.
yeah.
You may fire when ready. It's a little sticky, huh?
So second group, better ammunition. I used modern factory loaded ammunition. So I've got one of these holes is pre-existing. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 on target. So
In the black.
in the black, the elevation here could be because, again, I didn't adjust my scope. So I was just kind of putting the center post on the bottom of the paper. But yeah, that's not a bad group. 4 shots and about 1.5 inch, 2-inch string. Yeah, so it's not bad shooting. That would definitely qualify within sniper standards. I did pull one shot that I realized, and so that's probably that one right there when I pulled it. So
Ended up getting closer to the bullseye anyway, so.
yeah, but as far as an actual group without adjusting the scope or anything like that, that's not too shabby. That's acceptable, especially for a surplus rifle like this that, you know, is essentially stock. That's more than acceptable. A 4-inch group was deemed, well, a 2-inch group was deemed sniper quality for the time. So that right there, that was within a 2-inch group with, you know, one flyer, which was probably me. But yeah, that's not too shabby.
That's pretty reliable for something. The
Yeah.
system is really old. Old scope, old rifle. Basically unmodified infantry rifle with a scope on it.
Yeah, and I have no idea how many rounds have been through this gun. I mean, the barrel's original, so who knows?
All right, we'll give the irons a try. See how much of a difference it is.
Yeah.
All right. Why am I here? I'm not quite a sniper. I'm not a sharpshooter. I'm not qualified. I could barely see the target. You might need to cover me if I miss. Getting a little sticky, I don't know why. I think I see the target. Nice hard ground. I hate Russia. Russia sucks. Come here, Ruski. I'm empty! Charge! For the fatherland! We have the Hund. Seconius. Everyone, this is Seiko.
Hi.
Hey, that's Seiko. Go.
Sorry, there's a
She's
dog.
on camera shy now.
There's a dog, I was distracted. It happens sometimes.
So we had a little technical difficulties with the camera. The camera suddenly died while you were ripping a full magazine with the little shorty Mauser.
Oh, okay, yes.
And so we didn't have that, and then we also didn't get to film shots from the Iron Sight K98k.
Correct.
And so I just got a picture of it, so we'll throw that up here.
Yeah.
But we noticed some interesting things within the difference of the within the range, at least 100 yards here that we did,
Yeah.
roughly like 99 yards, 98 yards. 98. K98's at 98.
Yeah, it's a coinky dink.
And we noticed that there wasn't that much of a difference in grouping.
No, not really. But what could be interesting, another thought that I had too since then was, next time we do something like this, we should use the same ammunition in both guns. Because one of the things was I was using 1973 Yugo surplus, you were using modern production PPU match, and our group size was about the same. So I'd be curious if with the same ammunition, what that would do, and just kind of eliminate one of those variables. So just something we can do at a future date and time.
We'll get more organized, and right now we're just kind of doing this when we have time.
Yeah, it's just spontaneous. Hey, I'm coming over. So, yeah.
And I did notice too that like within the 100 yards here we were shooting, it's like the optic didn't really make you more accurate, but you know, I noticed that you were like going more with your optic on your scoped rifle. You were going like a little high and right, and I was going low and left.
Of course, but my scope is also, I just had it out shooting at 650 yards. And so I had the elevation zeroed for 600 yards. And I didn't really want to go adjusting it back down until I get everything marked off and play with that. But that's a whole other side project that I'm working on there, to dial in my scope and my rifle to different loads. So I'm kind of playing with that right now, and that's why I didn't adjust the scope, but that's why it was so high when I was holding at the bottom edge of the paper and still hitting that high. But that's, you know, with long range zero shooting at 100 yards, that's what's going to happen. So it's one of those things that I'm playing with. I'll work it out next time for sure. I'll have it dialed in I'll have a 100-yard dash on my turret and be able to just zero it right to that. Yeah.
Yeah, but that was really interesting too. Is like, because I've heard like with a lot of like the modern day take on that is like that the scope didn't necessarily make guys shoot better, but it made it much easier to get target acquisition and actually hit what they're shooting at.
That's one of so that's another thing we could try too, is have multiple targets downrange next time. We could do balloons or something and have multiple have 5 targets, 5 shots, same ammunition between the two guns. We can experiment that way the next time.
Yeah, because that definitely helps you. Like, okay, there's my target. I don't have to focus on it as much. It's like with crosshairs. Like, if it's filling up at 4 power scope, you're like, I'm confident I can hit that. Hit it, like, do a shot.
Yeah.
And you can identify targets too, like even without a spotter. You just be like, oh, scope it. That's an enemy.
Oh, that could be entertaining too.
Yeah.
I've got some ideas we'll talk about off
Put different helmets. Put a couple helmets out there that
different markings on the balloons.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's obviously going to be a win for the scope for sure.
Yeah. And I noticed with the irons, I thought it was going to be way worse actually.
I was kind of expecting it to be a bit worse too, but then again, you're also not a terrible shot, so that helps. I
noticed that like you were running a typical light load for either Gebirgsjäger or Scharfschützen light. So you had the Bergmutze cap, and you were wearing the white over camo tunic underneath in your belt.
Yeah, there was significantly more snow on the ground yesterday, so yeah.
And then I was running with the irons to make it true, like what they would have is the Stahlhelm,
or your standard infantry setup.
Standard infantry combat kit, which includes Y-strap, belt, ammunition pouches, bread bag, canteen, mess kit, and gas mask tin.
Yeah, I was just traveling light just to get, the old shoot and scoot methodology of get in, fire a few rounds, and just boogie.
Yeah, and there's a lot of guys you see in photos doing that when they know they're going to be in areas they're going to fight. If you're rucking, though, you're probably going to have a lot of that shit on you.
Oh, yeah.
And I noticed, too, that everything else wasn't that bad. Once it's on, you notice how hard it was to get on. But once it's on, it's pretty well balanced. It doesn't really move around that much.
Yeah.
And the gas mask tin does bounce.
Yeah.
And make a little noise. But the worst thing was that Stahlhelm. Every time laying prone like you were, okay, we'll make it the same. It kept going down. I'm like,
yeah, I was noticing that between shots, you were having to reset your helmet every time.
Which is hilarious because everyone regards that helmet as like, oh, that's such a good design. And it's like, not for
it's
laying
a great design for shrapnel raining down on you. It's a great design for that.
It's another example of the Germans like, what did we use in World War I? We'll just improve that slightly and keep using it.
Yeah, might as well. Yeah.
Well, the British were guilty of that too. So
Pretty much everyone was, minus the Americans, because we looked at the World War I helmets and went, yeah, we could do so much better.
but you can definitely see like the ease of shooting too. Like if you had a scope in front of you too.
Yeah.
When I get mine dialed in, my sniper rifle dialed in, we'll see how different it is with soft cap putting a scope up to your face with a helmet compared. Like
I don't want to run a helmet with that scope, because that
Yeah.
gun jumps back. Even with this hat, there were a few times when you'll probably see it in the footage where the scope came back and actually hit the brim of my hat and popped my head up. But so with a steel helmet, I don't really want to do that because I don't want to mess up my scope.
Yeah.
But in some of the later shooting scenes with my scoped rifle, you'll see I've actually raised my cap up a little bit. What's interesting is I've actually seen in some of the photos of the original German snipers, and they're wearing their field caps, the hats are raised up just a little bit to kind of clear that scope. So I think that was a common thing of the scope coming down and hitting your hat when you were wearing it low. So you raise it up a little bit, get it out of the way, and your scope is no longer hitting the bill of your hat.
Yeah, and I don't recall seeing a lot of photos of soldiers wearing the style helm with the sniper rifle either.
No,
If they do, they're in transit or something. Or
yeah.
like you said,
or
one guy.
photo op. There's one that was
Yeah.
obviously a photo op because the camera was taken from kind of a forward angle.
Yes, it's an SS guy who's propping his boot up on a Kubel or some vehicle, and he's like, yeah, I'm cool. He's got goggles on his helmet, and it just definitely looks like the stigma of the German regulation saying you must wear the style helmet in combat is probably pushing against the practicality of trying to get a good picture.
There's
with the scope in the helmet.
There's a trade-off with some things where it's okay. Yeah, I want to wear a ton of body armor, but I can't do X, Y, and Z tasks that I need to get done. So yeah, if you're wearing a steel helmet, but you need to be able to get down on a scope. Yeah, I can see where you would ditch the helmet to run the scope better.
Spending most of your time prone to
Yeah.
trying to observe.
Yeah.
The helmet is just the German style helmet is not designed at all for you to be laying down, which is makes
Great
sense.
for trench warfare when you're
Yeah.
upright and your rifle's propped up fine and everything's great. Oh, phenomenal for that.
It's very much a helmet for like sitting straight up, good protection from everything. Yeah, but you don't want to be laying down.
Goes back into the World War I
Yeah.
ethos, and hey, this worked here. Let's apply it here.
Yeah, so we learned a lot about
Yes.
the capabilities of these guns,
Yeah.
scoped and iron sighted,
Yeah.
with the equipment on and off, running light and running heavy.
Yeah.
Well, everybody, this is Kevin Underwood. Go check out his. You're opening your shop.
Yep, I'm opening.
Ironclad Gunworks.
Yep, Ironclad Gunworks. It's 2 words, Ironclad Gunworks. It'll be ironcladgunworks.com. Working on getting the website set up right now. By the time this goes up, I might have the website live. So, and then I'm getting my shop up and running out of Three Forks, Montana, and I'll have a full-service gunsmithing shop where I'll be able to do sniper conversions or any other general gunsmithing needs. I'll be specializing in kind of 1940s and earlier firearms, all the way through into flintlocks and everything else. Just all the old historic stuff is that's my specialty. So that's what I'll be setting my shop up to be working on, and looking forward to getting that going here in the next month.
I'm super excited for you.
Yeah,
It's gonna be awesome.
Oh,
Get
yeah.
that set up.
Yeah.
So yeah, the rifle you saw in this video today, one of them on the table, the cleanest looking one was one he built. So if you are interested, you can find him.
Yeah.
He's willing to work on rifles like that. So
Yep, most definitely. And Mosin snipers, number 4 snipers, anything like that, I'm more than willing to work on it.
and we can see what they can do. They hold 0. They work.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, definitely holds 0.
They're good.
Yeah.
They're not a reenacting piece. They actually function and they work.
Yeah, not just for aesthetics. It's
Like
if
mine.
if I wouldn't take it out into the field and use it to go put food on the table and trust my life to it, then I'm not going to build it. And that's how I approach customer guns as well. If I don't trust this piece with my own life in that particular scenario, then I'm not going to build it, or it shouldn't be built in the first place. So that's my approach to things, and that's how I approach my business.
a good way to approach it. Stuff that works.
It's a serious way
It's
to
not a
approach
prop.
it. It's the only way to do it. So,
All right. Well, thank you everyone for
Yep.
tuning in. We had a lot of fun today shooting.
a lot of fun.
Thank you again, Kevin, for coming out.
Thank you for
It's
hosting
always
me.
a pleasure.
Thank you for hosting me, Kenley. It's
All
been
right.
wonderful. And
Until next time,
yeah, sounds good. Looking forward to it.
we got to figure out what we're going to do next.
We'll see.
You'll see too.
Yeah, eventually you'll find out. Awesome. Thank you, Kenley.
Thanks again, Kevin. We'll see you next time.
Sounds good. Looking forward to it, bud.